Hello S3D, Sacred Geometry Decoded. I've been doing a series in regards to Cygnus, Masonic symbolism, Shakespeare codes, alchemy and connections. Well, as the way happens, I get diverted. Okay, so the Greater Giza Master Plan and some very, very interesting connections. So let's just get stuck into it. So the last one I was talking about precession. There are 3 seasons in Egypt, therefore if the same line of dividing the great year into 3 seasons would be 8,640 years. Each of these are very important numbers, but 864. Okay. This connects to the Nile Flooding Cycle, the symbols of Aquarius, weights and measures, especially Norma Nilotica, sacred ruler for measuring flooding, buildings and roads. Okay. The summer solstice, if you stand at this point, I'll explain why this point's so important. If you stand there on June 21st, the sun will set right between the Great Pyramid and Khafre's Pyramid. The flood cycle, the flood season, was called Akhet, inundation, the season of the flood. It ran from June to September. That's the symbol for Akhet. The pyramids are also called the Akhet Khufu, Akhet of Khafre, for instance. And there we have the causeway, and the sun would set right along the causeway in September, marking out the flood season. It just so happens to lovely match the symbols. A couple of versions of the symbol for Akhet. The snake eating its tail, connections to Heliopolis, but the 3 seasons. Tomb of Ani, notice, okay, what we have is the cycle of growth, Peret, the cycle of harvest, as they're harvesting, Shemu, and the flood cycle. Notice these images of the steps. Okay, that's an interesting one because we also see it in, and this is also from that tomb of Ani, the double lions with Akhet in the middle. Notice that bar with the 2 little prongs coming off. Alchemical symbolism. So this is from the tomb of Senedjum. Same thing. Notice the floods at the bottom. A boat is bringing a step block right up to there. And then we have the growth cycle, and then we have the harvest cycle, all connected to Heliopolis and the story of Atum and the flood seasons and the cycles, but Akhet and the snake eating its tail. And well, okay, that one I was in the previous episode. Again, snake eating its tail, alchemical symbolism, especially more recent times in the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail. Cleopatra, the alchemist, ancient Egyptian famed alchemist who was revered by Arab alchemists and as well as European alchemists centuries, millennia later. The symbol of a snake eating its tail, just a common one. That was link will be in the description. And okay, Arab alchemy text. Notice that bar in regards to geometry, astronomy, arithmetic, music and alchemy, and well, yeah, okay, so Musketyu, the northern constellation, which is so important in the pyramid texts of Unas, for instance, connected to the northern constellations, and what's she carrying there? Same symbol. Okay. Snake eating its tail, flood cycles, the rhythm of the flood, the 3 seasons of a flood related, is the heartbeat of Egyptian life. The rhythm of the solstice and equinox cycles is the rhythm of all life on Earth. Even quite cave-dwelling creatures which have devolved into blindness because the sun is irrelevant to them, still live by this cycle because the nutrients they get washed through is part of the heartbeat of life. Even underground, this equinox solstice cycle is crucial. And it's the heartbeat of Egyptian life that defines the floods. So the Akhet, the flood, just so happens to match lovely those pyramids with the setting sun on June 21st. Even on late September, the sunset goes right down the causeway, matching these other depictions. I think that's a curious fact, in regards to Akhet and cycles of life, the symbols. That was from the last one. So, okay, now we'll get to that first. So back to Giza Pyramids, the larger Giza Complex. Guilio Magli, I'll link this again in the description. He's got other papers. You can find him on Academia EU. And let's revise what, let's look what he's doing. So the larger Giza complex and the alignments and the seasons, which define the life of it, and astronomy, and also the geometry of it. So we see the Khafre Valley Temple Sphinx temple beneath the Sphinx, as it's called, Khentkawe's pyramid, Menkaure, Khafre, and Khufu's pyramid, and of course the causeway to Khafre's pyramid. This causeway leads right to this doorway here. There we see Google Earth screenshot. That's, you're looking through that doorway. That doorway and that path aligns with the causeway. So before the causeway begins, we already have the alignment through this valley temple, as it's called. So just above the red line, that's that alleyway leading to the doorway, leading to the causeway. This is the Google Earth Street View screenshot, just as you emerge out there. Now I've just airbrushed a little bit to get rid of tourist trade and the clutter there. So this is the view you would see just as you emerge from that doorway. And this is a zero point marker, which is so important through architectural traditions throughout history. I've done the omphalos, umbilicus, benben stones, betel stones, how important they are, 0 point markers, for instance, even just out the doorway of Chartres Cathedral here in Australia, in England, America, it's all over the place. 0 point markers, central survey points. But I've reduced some Menkaure, Khafre, Great Pyramid. Just so happens again that from that point, that's where the Sphinx would obscure. The high priest of Heliopolis was called the chief of the observers. There was a sanctuary to Sheshet there. Imhotep was the chief of the observers, astronomer royal, as we would call them now. And this here, just outside the doorway, forms a 0 point marker. Just through that door. That's now Guilio Magli, archeo-astronomical hints at a common project of the two main Giza pyramids. Well, let's include the Menkaure's and Khentkawe's in this particular geometry and astronomy. All right. The 3 seasons, the flood cycle. The floods come right up to the base of the Giza complex. This was the rhythm of life. Even we see in these again the illustrations. Notice again, just to point out, notice the ship. The water comes right up to there, and what are they bringing to the coast? Hints. Okay, these are the seasons. So along the base of Khafre's pyramid, right through that 0 marker point, marks the sunset and sunrise of the equinox. Equinox happens twice a year, and it would follow this line. Summer solstice happens once a year. There are 2 solstices, but the summer happens once a year. Then you would have the winter solstice down to the south. But the summer solstice runs right in between the Great Pyramid and Khafre's pyramid. This is an 8-sided pyramid, and this is an 8-sided pyramid. Stonehenge, the winter solstice sunrise, summer solstice, all this is a common theme cross time, cross culture. It's not limited to Stonehenge. You'll find it up in Scotland and Callanish and all these other places in the UK, Karnak in France, for instance, but down to Australia, Wurdi Youang. This has been dated at possibly 10,000 years old, even older than, equal to or older than Nabta Playa in Africa, not too far away from in Egypt, Nabta Playa, because we're Australia, Southern Hemisphere, the midwinter or the winter solstice is June 21st, Northern Hemisphere solstice is on summer solstice, June 21st. Previous episode, we're talking about all these connections in New York. 42nd Street, UN building, 42 floors, 39 above, 3 below. The Equinox bell, which is run on the equinox, leads along to 42nd Street and the solstice, and these connections to the 42 books of Thoth or Hermes Trismegistus, 42 in the Book of the Dead, and so forth. That was in the episode. Let's not cover that again. Equinox, the pyramid of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza. On the equinox, the serpent, alright, light and shadow. Smoke and mirrors, light and shadow. That happens on the equinox. There's a big, for every year people come to look at this happen. This is an old photo of the Giza Great Pyramid on the equinox, 8-sided. You can even get a trace of it there. Now, I'm curious. I could not find any recent photos of this. I can't explain why it doesn't happen anymore, or whether this was genuine or not. Let's put that to the side. Chichen Itza, it does happen. If it stopped happening there in Kukulkan, I don't know why it's not happening in Egypt anymore, or at least why people aren't taking photos of it. That to the side, the equinox alignment's definitely there. Back to the flood cycle, the rhythm of life. Now I've painted this in blue because the Nile would come up to this point based on this picture, even higher depending on the shifting sands and the shifting Nile. But the flood would have come right up to the base of the Valley Temple and the Sphinx Temple, for instance, as we saw in those pictures, to deliver the stones there as well, as those boats and those earlier images we saw. Okay, so the summer solstice, northern hemisphere, June 21st, right in between those two of the two greats of the Great Pyramids, matching Akhet. That's 28 degrees before we get to there. So the causeway is 14 degrees north of true west. That alignment is 28 degrees north of true west. This marks the flood cycle, this division here. And of course it matches wonderfully to Akhet. It's science. You know, there's a tendency to, both by the mainstream academics and also by the alternative side, to put a ritual, religious sense on everything. Well, I think it's more important to examine the science of it, because this is the rhythm of life of Egypt. It's the rhythm of life of the whole biome of the earth. Okay, so from that exact same point to the very corner of Menkaure's pyramid, 256 degrees, so 14 degrees minus 270 is 256. Musical connections there. Just so happens, just so happens that that's half a nautical mile. A nautical mile is defined as the equatorial circumference of the Earth divided by 21,600. Therefore, this distance is 1/43,200th of the Earth. And we'll get more into this because this gets crazy. This gets crazy. Okay, that's 14 degrees. Matches that. Those other alignments. Now, Khentkawe's pyramid. Oh, 14 degrees. Oh, how about that? There's a close-up of it. So we see this perimeter around it. That's where the 14 degree, so 270 minus 28 is 242 degrees. That's where that point will cross through, again touching the corner of that pyramid. So 14 plus 14 plus 14 equals 42. Oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Now, it just so happens if you divide degrees into seconds and minutes, there's a shag storm of awesome coincidence that's going to link all this stuff together. Anyway, weights and measures. You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. This gets nuts. I'll do some more on this because Larry from AIP pointed out that there is a stone which would just be over here on Khufu's pyramid, which aligns to the head of the Sphinx. Well, it actually aligns to the 0-point marker, which aligns to Khentkawe's at 28 degrees from true west. From there to Menkaure's corner, 14 degrees from true west. Along the base of Khafre Pyramid, true west. Along the causeway, 14 degrees north of west. And then through the very center of the Khafre's and Khufu's pyramid, 28 degrees north of west, marking out the flood seasons and cycles, the rhythms of life, which are not the Egyptian rhythms of life, but the whole of Earth lives by this cycle. And from these cycles is how we measure precession. So precession is really secondary to this. Whether it's the North Star, they're good for navigation, they're good for calendar keeping, but the essence of it is the solstice periods. And again, more to come. It's there, it's measurable, it's tangible, it's testable, and it's appropriate to the fertility cycles, the cycles of life as defined by nature. Nature insists on it.